Hi, this is Stevie. I thought I would do a simple project today in case you're new to watercolor and line and wash. This was something that I taught recently in a workshop, and it's a little different, but I had an extra drawing that I thought I would go ahead and work on. And you can see that I've penciled in some cloud shapes in the back, and I didn't use the ink for that because I don't want it to show that much. But I'm going to try to soften those cloud shapes as I go along and show you how to do that. Right now I'm mixing some cobalt blue and manganese blue together, along with just a tiny bit of permanent rose to make my sky color. And just putting it on dry paper, my brush is wet, but it's dry paper, and working around those cloud shapes. Notice that I'm not being that careful about the cloud shapes, just trying to leave that white space. And I'll go back and soften those shapes in a little while. But just trying to get my color in before it dries. I live in Arizona, so the paper dries really fast. And I'm working on Canson sketchbook paper. It's 140 pound. And I like it because it's smooth for sketchbooks, but it does dry very quickly. So you can see I'm working really quickly to keep those edges soft and wet so that I don't end up with hard lines. And I will be changing the shapes of these clouds a little bit as I go. Notice that I can get in there and really scrub the edges of those clouds with a wet brush, and then dry my brush on a paper towel and go back and pick up some more paint. That gives it a nice soft shape to the cloud. I have a spot there where my paper has dried right above the center of the house, and I think I did pretty well to soften that up and get rid of the hard edge. I may have to fix that later. So same on this side. I have those cloud shapes I'm working around with the same color, the same sky color, and just moving around, trying to work quickly to keep the paper from drying up before I want to keep those shapes from drying up before the paper dries, or I'll have some really hard edges to work with. So there, I'm just going back, scrubbing the edges. I wanted to leave a couple of hard edges on those clouds, but I don't think I was very successful in doing that. And notice how I bring some of that sky color more into the center of the clouds, and that gives it some nice shadow shapes. And that's a really easy way to do that without getting into too much fuss. There I was adding a little of the color to get some shadow shapes and working on softening that edge on the left side. There you can see how I've added water, but then I go back and pick up some of that color and dry my brush on a paper towel and pick up some more of the color to get those whiter shapes. Now on down to, I'm just doing some fixing there, some spots that I missed, and cleaning up my edges there. What you see in the background behind the house is water, a lake or ocean, but just some kind of water. And that's what I'm going to work on next. I wanted a little bit darker color, so I picked up my Winsor blue and mixed it a little bit with the other colors that I had, the cobalt and the cerulean blue. And I dropped in a little bit of sap green as well. I like that for a watercolor, and I didn't mix it too much. I just dropped it in there. And notice I left a few little white marks to indicate some movement on the water also. And nothing too difficult, just these are very simple things to do, simple shapes. So this would be a very good project for you if you're new to watercolor. And I don't have a drawing for you, but you're welcome to use my drawing. If you go back to the beginning of the video and take a screenshot, then you'll have that drawing to refer to do your own. So you're quite welcome to do that. There again, I was leaving white shapes in the water to show some movement, darkening it up a little bit. I wanted to make sure the colors match on both sides of the house. Just checking my paper to make sure it's dry. Sorry about all the movement on the camera. I was working with a ring light overhead, and my camera's attached to that, and every time I bump it with my head, it does that. So I'm sorry about that. There I was just putting in the tree that's in the background there. I used a little bit of raw sienna to give it some light at the top. And then I added in some of my Winsor blue and maybe a little bit of sap green as well. But the Winsor blue helps to darken it up, especially at the bottom, indicating a few little leaves there on the tree, on the edges of the tree. And I see some spots that I forgot. I'll go back to later to finish off that sky on the left side. So moving over to the right side of the house, this tree is a little more in front of the house, a little closer, so I wanted to make it a little bit brighter, use some warmer colors. So I used my Hansa Yellow Medium, and that's a nice bright color. And then I added some of the blue color to that, the Winsor blue mixed with the cobalt blue. And you can see how much water I'm using because you can see the reflection on the paper. I like to use a lot of water, and I like to do that so that the colors will just blend naturally on the paper rather than mixing them all on your palette. So that gives it a nice little look. And there I finally noticed that spot that I missed with the sky, so I have to go back and fix that. And that was that mix of cobalt blue and manganese blue. I like manganese blue rather than cerulean blue. And they're very close, very similar, but cerulean blue granulates a lot, and I don't like that too much for this, so I like the manganese blue. I use that quite a bit. Either one is fine. Now moving on to those bushes that you see running down each side of the hill. And I was going to use permanent rose, but decided not to because that's such a bright color. And they're a little further away, so I used my alizarin crimson for that. And this is a quick, easy way to do bushes. And again, see all of the water that I have on my brush. You can see the water sit on the paper. But start with your flower color first, and I put that color on the top of the bushes. Then I'll go back and add my foliage color to the bottom and let them mix naturally. I just added a little highlight color there into the pink. It was my permanent yellow deep, I believe. Looks like an orange, kind of an orange color. Anyway, then I added the mix that I had, the green mix, which was my Winsor blue and probably some yellow or some sap green. Either one of those would work. And see how they blend together nicely? Be careful not to use too much of the green. I want more of the flower color to show, so I like more of the pink color to show. It's up to you, but it can get away from you, so try not to use too much of the dark color at the bottom. Don't overpower the flowers. And some of my color is light there, and it's going to get lighter as it dries. I may have to go back to those bushes later and add a little bit more color. Now I'm over at the arbor over the little gate, and I did use permanent rose here, but it's very diluted, as you can tell. I didn't want it to be too strong. Added my orangey color again for some highlights. That's the permanent yellow deep. And I'm going to wait just a minute before I add the darker foliage color, just to let some of that water sink into the paper. So I'm going and doing something else instead. I wanted to work on that chimney, and I mixed up some red. I use anthracenoid red instead of cadmium red. They're close in value. Anyway, I used that color mixed with some quinacridone burnt orange and a little bit of transparent orange to make the chimney color. Then now back to that little arbor, and my paper's still really wet, but I'm taking a chance here. I added another color. It's a light green color that I have called green gold, and I put that on first so I can leave some light green highlights on the edges of the foliage. And if you mix some of that green gold with ultramarine blue, that gives you a nice darker green color as well. That's what I did here. It's just ultramarine blue with a little bit of the green gold. So there are lots of ways you can mix greens, and I encourage you to just try different things, to try them out and see what you like. Now I'm reinforcing some of that color on the flowers on the arbor. And you can see that this doesn't take long, and you don't have to do that much to it to get a cute little painting. I had forgotten a little piece there next to the chimney. I'm just filling that in for the sky. And I have a bit of a bloom at the top of the sky, but I don't really care. Usually on this paper is pretty forgiving. That's one reason I like to use it when I teach. You can go back, once it's dry, you can go back over it and smooth out any blooms or anything else. If you haven't tried it, it's a great paper to practice on. It's nice for sketches. I like how smooth it is. Now I'm going back to those bushes and getting them, just reinforcing the color a little bit, getting them a little brighter. Using the same colors, just going over it again. You can see on the left how the color fades when it dries. But this is just a fun little project to do. Not too stressful. A very easy one for beginners. On to the house. It's a white house, but I'll talk about that in more detail. I wanted to get something in those windows, but I didn't want something really dark like black. So I just added some sky color in there, some cobalt blue. I used a lot of water though with the cobalt blue, so it's not too dark, not too heavy. And for that roof, I mixed up, I use that for a shadow color too. That is a mix of cerulean blue and a little bit of permanent rose, because that's such a strong color, and then just a dab of sap green, and that's to gray it down. So it's kind of a purpley color, and I use that quite a bit. I'll be using it on there I'm doing it again on that part of the roof, on that little porch, and it makes a nice purplish gray color. Then I dropped a little bit of a yellowish color in there. I think that's my permanent yellow deep, to indicate some light, maybe some sunlight on the roof. And now I'm going to do some shadows on that porch. And I have to tell you, after I got this done, I realized I made this shadow going in the wrong direction, because the sunlight is supposed to be coming from the top right, and this is totally backward. So if you do this project, have your porch shadow going the other way. I hope you can understand what I'm saying. Some people might not even notice that, but it really bothers me, and I can't believe I did that. But those kinds of things happen. Just go with it. It's really not something that's fixable because it's too big of an area. So there I'm getting some of that shadow color under the eaves on the roof. And notice how those green trees around the house are a nice contrast. It brings out the fact that that's a white house. There, to be honest, I don't know what was there. I couldn't, when I did the drawing, I just didn't even think about it. So I put some foliage in there, and that took care of that problem. And actually, I got the shadows on that screen door on the right side. I just have that diagonal shadow going the wrong way. The same with the windows at the top. That shadow would be correct, but I have shadows going in two different directions, so that doesn't make sense really. But just be aware of that. There I'm just getting some shadows on the gate just to show that I didn't forget about it. And what I like to do when I paint white houses is put a little sunlight color on them. So I did that on the gate, and just a little bit of color, not much, and really water it down. Just drop in a little bit of watered down, not bright yellow, don't use that, but that is the permanent yellow deep. And it just gives a nice touch to the house. More camera jiggling there. I'm mixing up a dark color so that I can get some foliage along what is going to be a fence, that little white block that you see that I'm working on now. And I had forgotten and put a line, I used an ink pen to make a line across the top, and I really didn't want to do that. I just forgot and did it. So I'm using the foliage, the dark foliage, to cover that up. And it doesn't bother me that much, but that's just a little trick to know. I could have put some pretty flowers there, but I wanted to cover up that ink line, so I used the dark green foliage, like a vine hanging over the fence. And I still like the look of that, and it complements the White House really well. I went back and I'm going back and just reinforcing as it dries up and gets lighter. I just reinforce the color. Now I'm using my little 1/4-inch flat brush to make the slats of the fence, and the way I do that is just by painting in between. I lay that brush down flat on its side with the dark foliage color to indicate slats on the fence. And that's really all you need to do. You don't want it to look perfect. There's an artist named Joyce Hicks who says, "Perfection is the enemy of great art." And that's so true. People are drawn to things that are not perfect. So if you make a mistake, just own it, like my shadow on the front of the house. So there, I softened the tops of that foliage, and that's all you need for the fence. So on down to the front, which is like a lawn area, and I had put in some lettering that I have to work around because I want to put color on that lettering. So I'm just putting in some grass colors. I started with my green gold, which is the light green. You could use yellow too. And then I added bits of quinacridone burnt orange, which is like burnt sienna, and then some sap green. And I just use a lot of water and just drop those colors in randomly. It looks so much better if you don't mix them all together. Just drop them in and let the water and the paper do its work. Getting a shadow in that I forgot on that porch. And I just need to let that dry a bit before I do my lettering. For my lettering, I use a really small brush. This is a Princeton Velvet Touch number 1. The liner brush I don't like too much because I can't control it as well. But this number 1 brush has shorter bristles, so it's a number 1 round. And notice that when I put the color on, I'm using 2 colors. I used Permanent Rose for the top of the letter, and then Cobalt Blue for the bottom. And I'd say practice this on some scratch paper and see how much water you need, because if you add too much water, it spreads and then you lose control of it and it goes all over the place. But I have found if I don't use enough water, I can't get the 2 colors to blend together when I do the letters. So it's different for each type of paper and each person. So definitely something you want to practice. And if you'd like to learn more about lettering and don't know where to go, and I'm talking now about lettering, not formal calligraphy, there is a great site. She has a YouTube channel and a website, Lindsay Ostrom, and her website is called creatorofcuteness.com, and she's on Facebook as Creative Hand Lettering with Lindsay Waltman Ostrom. And she is an expert at this kind of lettering, and I've learned a lot from her. I have done calligraphy for many years, probably 40 years, more formal calligraphy, but for sketching, I really like this type of lettering that's more playful and informal. And there are so many different things you can do with this kind of lettering. And once you learn how to do the basics, it's pretty easy. It just takes practice. To get really good at lettering, you need to practice a little bit every day. And one reason to do that is that you need to build up the small muscles in your wrist to have the control to do the lettering properly. But it's a great thing to do when you have a little bit of time and some scratch paper. Just practice, like if you're watching TV at night or something. That's a great time to practice your lettering. And there you go, A Summer Place. One of my students in my class that I taught came up with that title, and I thought it was so cute. So there you have it. And I did make a couple of changes after I finished this sketch, and I'm going to show you the final piece after I finished it and scanned it. So the lighting will look a little different. And here's the finished piece, all scanned. And I wanted you to see the clouds because when I had looked at those clouds when I got done, they looked like two cotton balls on either side of the house. So I extended them out a little bit to each side and to the top, just to get rid of that two cotton ball look. Anyway, I hope this helps you, and thanks for watching.